Do you know how to use the budget feature in QuickBooks Online? Well, whether you're budgeting for individual families or budgeting for a small business, this tool will help you create a budget and stay on a budget. And I'm going to show you exactly how to use it right now. Making a home budget in QuickBooks Online is one of the best things you can do for yourself if you want to manage your home, personal, family finances.
Now this feature is the best feature in QuickBooks Online.
This is really the feature that gives you total control over your family finances. This is the one that will reveal where you're spending too much, and it will also reveal the difference between what you thought you were going to make and what you really did make. These differences are displayed so clearly on the budget reports that you can really be empowered by what you see and make much better financial decisions for yourself, your home, and your family.
Now this is the feature that's really going to help you get everything under control.
So it's actually very simple to manage budgets in QuickBooks Online. You see, each budget is simply a data sheet where you input your limitations for the expenses and your expectations for the income that you expect to have in the future. And they can be any numbers you want. Then QuickBooks Online will generate a separate report for each budget data sheet that you set up, and each of those reports will compare your actual results from your actual transactions to each of the different budget data sheets that you set up so you can run different scenarios and really get a handle on your financial position. So here's an example of what a budget would look like. Notice the column headings across the top are the names of the months of the year because they divide the budget by months. But notice the row headings on the side are the names of the accounts that you are budgeting for. That means they're the expenses where you want to put limitations and income that you want to forecast how much you will get. Now, when the columns of the months cross the rows of the accounts, they make the little boxes, and those are the places for you to input your budgeted and expected amounts. Now, at the moment you go to create your first data sheet budget, QuickBooks Online will ask you, what specific fiscal year does this budget apply to? Now, don't worry if it's only part of a particular year. You still have to choose a specific fiscal year. And you also don't have to worry about how far in the future or the past that year can be. It can be any year you want. And the only other question QuickBooks Online will ask you at the moment you create your first data sheet budget is, do you want this budget to be an annual budget, a quarterly budget, or a monthly budget? Now, of course, most of the time, whether it's personal or business, it's a better idea to make a monthly budget. Because if you make a quarterly budget, you can only input the totals for the quarter and you can't split it into a monthly budget. But if you make a monthly budget, it can be condensed and summarized into a quarterly or annual budget. So these are the example numbers that we're going to put in for Serena's first budget. 2 months should be enough to make a point, and we will call the budget second quarter budget. But when we first open the budget window, it's very important that you know how to navigate and manage the budget window. So let's open it up for the first time together. We go to the cog wheel and click on it, go over to the column of tools and go down and click budgeting. Now, of course, if it's your first time coming to the window, You need to look at the little picture and click Create Budget. Now, we want to create a budget that's profit and loss, which means we want to know how well we're doing and compare our income and expenses, or actually our real income and expenses, to what we want our income and expenses to be. So we leave it there. But every budget must be associated with a specific fiscal year. So in our case, we're going to choose 2026. Leave all the other defaults because they're not relevant for us. And of course, you can explore changing them later. And then we're going to click Next. Now, here we are in the budget window, and we're about to put in the amounts. But there are two things that you need to know first before you start inputting the budgeted amounts. First, you need to give it the proper name. Now notice QuickBooks Online gave it a default name, but we'll click the pencil and put in the name that we want by removing the characters and typing in Serena second quarter. And you could put any words you want and then click Save. Now notice that's the official name of this specific data sheet that will be assigned for just the first quarter of 2026. Now, the other very important thing you need to know is how to manage the rows. It can be very tricky because you cannot filter and bring up the specific account you want to put in the budgeted amounts. What you have to do is click the arrows on the side to collapse the categories. Watch. If I click the top one, Accounts, I click the up arrow, becomes a down arrow. Now everything is condensed, and you could see there are 6 or 7 categories of accounts. Now, the proper way to manage this is to input one category at a time because you could get lost. So if I click the down arrow, notice it expands and opens up the income section where we can put in the forecasted income amounts. If I click the up arrow, it condenses the income section. So we'll do the income section first. We'll expand the income section and we'll come over to the numbers we're going to put in. And now we're going to put them in together. Cat sitting income 500 for April and bar bouncing income 700 for April. No problem. We come here, cat sitting for April. And after you expand the income section, QuickBooks Online will remember that when you come back to this budget, you want the income section expanded just like we did. Watch. If we close the budget window, we're now back at the budget list. In fact, even if we left the budget area completely and we click the cog wheel and click budgeting and came back to the budget list, we would see a list of every data sheet budget that we created. Now, right now, there's only one on the list. And if we double click any budget, we go back into that budget and notice QuickBooks Online remembered that we want only the income section expanded. Well, actually, you know what? Turns out that's not true. It actually reopened the other sections. So I guess that's a change in the default behavior of the window. But we have the income section open, and we're about to put in the income for the budget for April and May. Now, if we come here to this presentation, we see that I have prepared numbers for the Serena second quarter budget. And I feel 2 months is sufficient for us to learn the idea. Now, notice it starts with April and May. So what we can do in the budget window is scroll over so that April and May line up with the row headings here. So now we have April and May, and we can put in April cat sitting income and April income from bar bouncing. You can actually expand the names on the left by coming to the left column, the top right of the left column. See how you get the double arrow? Click and pull it out so we can really see the account names. So what was for April and what was for May for cat sitting and bar bouncing respectfully? 500 and 700. No problem. We put in 500, push the tab key. It actually moves to the right, so we're going to click under that. Income from bar bouncing, we expect 700 for April. But for May, let's take a look. We expect cat sitting to be 1,400 and bar bouncing to be 1,850. So we go back, cat sitting we expect to be 1,400 and we expect bar bouncing to be 1,850. And now we did the income section, we can collapse the income section. Now we can do the expense section. So we can collapse the cost of goods sold section and open the expense section. And here's again a piece of advice. Click the up arrow and collapse all of the subsections of the expense area, because our accounts that we're working with are not sub-accounts and subsections and will be lost going through this ocean of sub-accounts in the expense section. So get used to pushing the up arrow here so that you collapse everything. And notice the expenses that we're using all are written in capital letters, so they're much easier to see. Again, that helps you when you're in a situation that you can't filter, like here in the budget window. So what are the expenses that we expect to be our limits for April? Well, we have entertainment at $1,200, food at $220. So is it up here? Entertainment for April, $1,200. And food for April, we expect to have $220. What are the other expenses for April? Jewelry, $200, supplies, $500. Okay, jewelry, $200. Supplies expense for April, we expect to have $500. Anything else? And transportation expense, we expect for April to be $300. Now notice the May expenses are a little bit different. We can sometimes budget something for 1 month and have no limit the next month. Cat-related expenses, $125 for May. That's not a problem. Come back up here. Cat-related expenses, come across to the row of May, $125. Okay, but we didn't budget anything for April for cat-related or clothing. $400, clothing, $400. So some months will have no budget limit. And that's what this is illustrating. Entertainment expense, $800 for May. Okay. What else? Food expense for May, $170. Food for May, $170. And of course, jewelry for May. We don't have any jewelry for May, but we have supplies and transportation. Supplies for May, supplies, $200. And transportation expense for May, our last budgeted number, $350. And now we simply save the budget. Now, the great thing is that if we close the budget window after saving and reopen it after saving, it remembers all the numbers we wanted. But the important thing is to run the report to compare the budgeted numbers for that period of time to the actual transactions. And this one will look a bit silly, and you'll see why in a moment. When we click this cogwheel here, we can, well, actually, no, the report is actually in the reports area. If we close this out and we go to the left panel and click reports, and if we have not saved the budget versus actual report yet in our transaction list, we go to standard. And then when we go to business overview, we can get budget versus actual right here. Click on it. Now, when you open the budget versus actual report, you're going to have to choose the particular budget that you created. Okay, Serena second quarter was the only data sheet we created so far, so that's the only one this report can select. So notice when we look at the second quarter numbers for April and May, we notice the entire amount is all over budget or under budget. You see, it's negative if it's under budget, and it's positive if it's over budget. And the percent difference are all zero. And of course, we know the reason why. We didn't enter any transactions yet for April and May of 2026.
You can also make a budget data sheet for past transactions as well.
So because this feature is so great, we will now make a first quarter budget for Serena, and now we'll be able to compare it to actual numbers because we actually recorded transactions in the first quarter of 2026. So here we have the example numbers that I'm giving you to create your first quarter budget for Serena. And I'm going to stay with you to start you off. But you should be able to put in the rest of the numbers yourself, save the budget, and then come back to me so we can compare the actual first quarter numbers to the budgeted numbers we're about to put in. So here we are looking at the example numbers for Serena's first quarter budget. And of course, if we click the cog wheel and we go over to the tools column and click budgeting, we see right now there's only one on the list, but we're going to create another one that will be on this list when we come back. So we click create budget. And of course, we want it for the fiscal year of 2026 and leave all the other defaults and click next. Now, again, I strongly recommend the very first thing you do when you're creating a budget is give it a name so you don't get confused. And let's call this one Serena second quarter. That's all. Oh, excuse me. See what happens? It's really called Serena first quarter. And then when we save it, we'll have no problem because it's the only one with that name. Now, remember, you can collapse the income section or open it up and then go ahead and type in January's income. So if we come back here, we have 600 cat sitting and 250 bar bouncing in January. 600 cat sitting, 250 bar bouncing. And now I'm going to do the rest myself. And then when you finish, you'll be able to compare reports with me to see if you did your budget right. So now, after pausing the video, let's take a look at what the budget should look like. From the top right corner, we click the cog wheel. We go over to Tools and click Budgeting. And now we have two datasheet budgets on the list of budgets in the budget window. So let's double click on the one we just made, first quarter, and you see here are what the income accounts should look like. And unfortunately, even if you collapse all of the sub-accounts for expenses, it would still be very inconvenient to scroll through so many rows. And again, the budget window does not let you filter the accounts the way that some other windows do. But there is a solution. If you come up to the top right and click the cog wheel, you can click the box Hide Empty Rows. Then click Apply. That is super convenient, and it will condense only the rows that you're working with together in one scene so that you can handle that Now, of course, if you're missing one of the expenses, you can click the cog wheel and unhide and click apply. So you can go ahead and find that expense and put in a number. But once you put a number in the row and save the budget after putting the number in the row, you can then click the cog wheel, hide empty rows, and apply. And that will help you manage the budget window and not have to deal with many, many, many irrelevant rows. Now, once you're completely done, you click save and you can close this and come back to the list of budgets. So the way to get to that report is to scroll to the right so you can get the pull down arrow for that particular budget data sheet. Click the pull down arrow and click budget, run budget versus actual report. And here we are. Here we are, January 26. Here's what we actually recorded in this course as transactions. Here's what was budgeted. Here's the amount over budget. And here's the percent over budget. Okay? So, yeah, they subtracted out. Now, notice the expenses. Notice some expenses were budgeted for and some weren't. Let me zoom in a bit. You can always zoom in your browser, certainly. Boom, boom. Okay, that's nice. So you can clearly see the difference in supplies. Now, if we were way under budget, the difference is a negative number. If we were over budget, the difference is a positive number. But no matter what, it will say the percent difference whether you're over or under. And look, this is just for January. If I scroll over to the right, I can line up February's numbers with the row headings, and I can see each of February's expenses, what was budgeted for, the amount over, the amount under, the percent over, or the percent under. So you can see this is what really reveals what's going on. This really reveals where there's spending out of control or income that you're losing potential income from because you expected more and you need to investigate why it's less, and so on. So having this will help you have total control over your personal, non-business, family finances.